Mr. Rainwater.
Hey there, Chow.
Don't you wish you could eat without consequences?
Yes, of course.
Don't you wish you could just buy things without consequences?
There's so much that I want to do without consequences, but we live in a world, things happen, and for better or worse, there's consequences to all our actions.
Which brings us to our topic of tonight, though, creating without consequences. What would you define that as?
Yeah, I mean, to create without consequences means, making a piece of art without any kind of concern about how it's going to turn out. Zero concern about whether or not you'll even like it.
So consequences even unto yourself.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Thinking in almost an impossible state of mind, right? Which is a consequence-free zone. Because
other people describe it as "don't give a fuck" attitude.
Sure. I mean,
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say,
questions.
I think that's sort of the mind state like somebody like Andy Kaufman had, where he applied his art so ubiquitously that it became his life. To this extent, like you had no conception of the separation of the art from the artist, right? Where you're not sure if he's even playing a role anymore or if this is just him. And I think that requires sort of you're either have settled yourself with the consequences, right? Which is another way of being consequence free, is just accepting the consequences of whatever you're about to do, or just not being wrapped up into it. But what were you going to say, Joe?
Well, I was going to say almost that I disagree with about there being no consequences. I would almost say that the consequences were the art he was creating, right? I mean, he would do these outlandish things. He would poke and prod, almost like Borat.
Yeah.
And, to some extent it was funny, but the funnier part is watching people naturally react to it, like a prank video. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Those kinds of things that is the art, is the art of creating a problem for someone else, or the art of creating a reaction. No?
I think I get what you're saying. So, I mean, are you trying to make this the case for no matter what, you kind of do have consequences, whether or not you think otherwise?
Yeah. Like, I feel like Andy Kaufman, Borat, Impractical Jokers, like you could run down the list or whatever.
Sure.
Like their art is creating problems for other people or creating a reaction out of other people.
Right.
Like, obviously every artist's intention is to create a reaction from people.
Yeah.
Theirs is a little bit more proactive in the audience member. Do you know what I mean? Like, you make a movie, you want to make somebody laugh, cry, gasp, whatever.
Yeah.
But people like Andy Kaufman, the art he was creating was, I want this guy to hit me. I want this. I want this
that's a good point.
professional wrestler to punch me across the face as hard as he can, and that's going to get the laugh.
Sure. And I would say that's creating having accepted the consequences. Although I definitely see what you're saying, where there's a calculated aspect to it, right? Which means you are taking into consideration all the consequences. And there is a case, right, for Andy Kaufman where he would actually have a negative consequence if he didn't get what he wanted. Like if he didn't get punched in the face, right?
Yeah, there would be nothing to talk about. There wouldn't be anything entertaining. It would just be like, oh, it's this awkward interview.
Right. Well, and so the way that I'm thinking about it, though, is like in his situation, because let's just try and set it up as a scenario, right? Because I think if I'm thinking about what you're thinking about, probably like one of the David Letterman interviews, right? Where Andy Kaufman shows up, and it's like when he had been wrestling women and like was doing this whole like macho thing, and this guy comes in who's like, oh yeah, well how about you like fuck around with me,
Right.
And the thing is like when you look at that scenario, was that something that Andy Kaufman was trying to set up to happen? Was that intentional?
I think so.
Or did it happen by a happenstance, right?
I haven't watched Man on the Moon in
I haven't
years.
either. I mean, you could argue. Here's the thing: is you could argue that maybe all of it was set up by him from
Sure,
beginning to end, right?
sure. He could have. Yeah, it could have been, as they call in wrestling, a work.
Yeah, and it would make sense thematically, obviously, and Andy Kaufman being the kind of artist that he was, maybe that was the case. But it seemed very organic, and so it seemed like he was trying to set up things to where certain mechanics would play out over time just as a consequence of
Yeah.
X plus Y equals, this. And there's a possibility that it would have never come out as he wanted it to come out, and he would still have to keep the bit going and go for some other result, right? Like that is frequently a thing that happens in improv because you have two people, right? You have two people that set up a premise, but what actually happens in the premise is undetermined. And so you have to kind of go with what each other is setting up, and you have to take it to its logical conclusion while still like organically creating new twists on the situation. So I think there's a certain aspect where you have to be willing to let go of any sort of you have to let go to a certain extent of like what is the reaction going to be from the audience. You want a certain reaction, obviously.
Yeah.
So like I get what you're saying with Andy Kaufman, like he did all that stuff because he wanted to have a certain reaction from the audience. He wanted like them to be bewildered or to find it funny, obviously to find it funny. But there's a certain aspect, I think, to the way that he was creating where it almost didn't matter whether or not it was funny. It was just that the scenarios were so strange that you're going to have a reaction.
Yeah.
It may not be the actual reaction that, the artist wants explicitly, but you're going to have, like, it's the same way with a lot of gallery art is, I think a lot of artists make an infamous example I always like to go back to is like Warhol, right? Another Andy. It's the theme of this episode.
Shout out to the Andys.
I don't know if Warhol had a specific reaction that he was looking for. It's hard to know because
he's hard to know. Yeah.
Right, and he's hard to know. And I think it's because what he's trying to do is just get across an idea. He's not trying to get across a reaction. And so and this is frequently to the benefit and an issue with a lot of conceptual artists, is that they're not trying to get your reaction to it. They're trying to get an idea across to you, and then you interpret it as you want, and you take it in as you want. And I think that's why it's one of those aspects of art that a lot of people find off-putting, because it isn't directly engaging in the way that like a movie is directly engaging or a piece of music is directly engaging. It's engaging in a way where you have to put a lot of the homework into it, and that makes it incredibly difficult for certain audiences, right?
Sure.
Like, I want to read a comic book not necessarily because I want to immediately have to think deep, profound thoughts, but because I want to be entertained. And then I will pick certain writers and artists because the deep, profound thoughts are something that happen as a consequence secondary to being entertained. Like I very rarely pick books just to like, although I have made one, just, be confusing and bewildering and not know what the reaction from the audience is going to be. Right.
So is that something that kind of spurred this topic in your brain was Bat Monster?
Well, it's certainly the one that I have personally been engaged in. But there are other things that make me think about that. So like sketching is another example where I'm trying to get back into drawing on paper and just doodling and sketching.
Yeah.
To wake up some neurons, wake up some brain cells that I think have been kind of
dormant.
Yeah, dormant for a little bit. And part of when I enjoy that sketching process, so I'll just do like one page a day, and that's about 30 minutes or so, What I enjoy about that process is I'm not worried about what anybody thinks about it, what they're, like.
Well, but you worry about what you worry about what you're going to think of it, right? Because you do.
Not when I'm sketching. No.
But at the end of it, you are going to examine it and go, oh, okay, I learned how to do this, or I should have shaded that a different way, or blah 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 blah.
I think in some ways you're right. But not entirely. Like, I am sketching right now explicitly trying to do bad drawings, or not necessarily explicitly trying to do it, but just not caring whether or not it looks bad.
Okay, I was going to say, clarify between bad or bat drawings, because
yeah, no.
I thought you said bat drawings.
I'm not concerned about whether or not it's a bad looking drawing. I'm just concerned about getting the idea on paper. And then, because that idea is something I can extrapolate on or work on a different page. And it's something that I can evolve instead of like when I usually draw a comic, I have to get it right there, right? Mm-hmm. Like it needs to be completed in itself within the time limit set up. Whereas this, within 30 minutes, nothing needs to happen. I could just stare at a blank page for 30 minutes, and that's okay. Like that's what I'm getting at, right? In terms of having a consequence-free attitude to creation, at least for a limited period of time.
I wish I could do that. I really can't. I mean, in my head, when I'm I do that in my head. Like, you know what I mean? Like fleshing out story points or characters or lines of dialogue or whatever it may be. But in terms of actually doing the work, you know what I mean? Like whether someone else is going to see it or anything like that, that is, to me, that's consequence right there, because I'm losing time. That to me is an important thing, especially right now. You know what I mean? I'm basically a stay-at-home dad, so I only have so many free minutes in a day, and I literally mean minutes. Yeah. Where I can sit down and do something. So the consequence-free stuff is brainstorming in my head. But when I sit down to do it, it's like, okay, I got to accomplish something right now. Even if I move the marker by a slight millimeter, I have to move the marker. And that constantly is what's plaguing me in my head. As far as in the past, creating without consequence, you could say Digits was an entire exercise in that entire mindset, because within the first 30 seconds of that movie, I gave zero fucks about what happened to that movie. And it's not because of like poor camera quality or anything like that, but not even the first line of dialogue, the first lyric from the music playing over the opening credits. I'm the dude they want to come test. Like right off the bat, I've lost half the audience. You know what I mean? Like, and then whoever was left, I split the remaining half in another half with the Who Wants to Play Heath Ledger game. Like at that point in time, we literally, when we were making the film, we said to ourselves, this is a test movie. That's literally what we referred to it as. Can we see if we can do it? Doesn't matter if anybody likes it. It doesn't matter if it goes anywhere. It doesn't matter if it makes any money. All that we want to see if we can do is if we can make a feature film, period. That's it. That's the only thing we want to be able to do. In hindsight, we turned around and said, wow, we made a feature film that people actually enjoyed watching. Cool. Did it get into any festivals? No. Mostly because I only sent it to 3, and they were like the big ones like Cannes, and Cannes was never taking Digits. Let's be honest. But the entire time, it was mostly a very loose feeling of let's create, let's explore. There was a lot of improv on set. I allowed a lot of it. I mean, I had to wrangle some stuff because I knew the editor in my head was like, no, if he jumps on the table, I'm never going to be able to cut that in from another shot because the eye lines aren't going to match up from the other characters when they have their dialogue. So he can't jump on the table. But for the most part, they could play with lines. I was making up shots on the day. There was no storyboard. Props and stuff like that were props was more lazy than it was creating without consequence. Props was just like, oh shit, we need a hospital room. We don't have a hospital room. All right. I'm going to put up a computer monitor and buy some royalty-free stock footage of a heart monitor and stick it behind him, and we'll stick you on a cot, and that'll be our emergency room.
Yeah.
And to be fair, nobody's really said boo. You know what I mean? Like if you go back and you watch Digits when they're in the hospital at the end, it is the most ghetto, like cheapo production. Like it makes Neil Breen look like he had a budget. You know what I mean? Like it was
I
really
don't
bad.
know about that. I mean, I can't remember that scene, but I've seen a hospital room in a Neil Breen production. I'm kind of wanting to test that water a little bit.
The scene with TS and Charlie after the car accident.
I think that looked, as I remember, it looked like an actual hospital room. Whereas
because I shot it close. I shot it. There was a lot of close-ups, and he had a the gown on. And then, like I said, I cheated like a computer monitor in the background with a heart monitor on it. And I added some sound effects and this and that. But for the most part, like I kept it close. There was like the bright fluorescent lighting from overhead and whatever. The walls were kind of like a grayish, like kind of color. It was enough that you got what it was supposed to be. Yeah. And at that point, the audience was enjoying without care. You know what I mean? Like they knew what they were watching. They weren't expecting a Hollywood budget, and they were able to accept. Okay, it's a hospital room. He's in the hospital. That's what happened.
I think you've outdone Neil Breen. That's all I'm saying.
Okay,
pretty sure.
I'll take it.
If I remember it correctly, because Neil Breen's hospital room literally looks like a closet.
It might have actually been. Ours was actually a locker room, believe it or not. That's where we shot it in the karate school that I was teaching at. We were in a locker room for karate. But the point of the matter is like the entire movie was a creating without consequence. The only thing that was going to be lost at that point in time was in fact time. Like that was the only thing that was lost. Granted, I had spent about 10 grand, in the grand scheme of things on like camera and equipment and this and that. So that was, money that went down the hole. But on the bright side, between the movie theater showing and like Blu-ray sales, we just about made that back. Just about. I think I lost money on it, to be honest with you, but just barely made back our budget, which was fine enough for me because, I could eat, $1,000, $2,000 worth of stuff. And then of course your generous hookup that got us over the hump. Well, I still
No, what were you gonna say, Joe?
No, go ahead. Finish up.
Finish yours. Well, something that I wonder about is like, would it be, because you were kind of talking about like thinking about what it'd be like to do that sort of sketch out mentality, right? With what you do. What would it be like for you to do like just scenes, right? And then post them on YouTube. And I know like that's easy to say, right? As an idea. It's very like executive thinking where it's just like you just say it and then you assume that it gets done.
Just go do
it. Because I know you have to set up the people, right? You got to get the actors and all that and the settings and all the. But like, I imagine, because the way that I often see that you like to do writing, it seems like a great way to sketch would be writing dialogue scenes, finding people who would want to do them somehow. That's the hard part. That's a whole other thing. Then just like filming that, right, within maybe it's a day, maybe it's an hour, maybe it's 5 hours, whatever it is, right? Mm-hmm. And then just like posting on YouTube and then seeing how that process plays out. And then maybe you, over time, the way that you write it is such that you could actually stitch together all the scenes into some kind of movie.
I've thought about doing stuff like that. To be honest with you, there were multiple times when we shot short films, we shot little scenes, we shot this and that. I'm part of a group right now. I'm actually going on Saturday. They're doing a micro short. I'm going to be shooting behind the scenes footage for them. It's not that big a deal, but I don't know. A lot of the times for me, doing stuff like that right now feels like a betrayal to working on Haunted.
Well, sure.
Like I should be finishing that script. I should be locking that schedule. I should be throwing out casting calls. I should be testing the makeup. I should be doing lighting tests. I should be da-da-da-da. Now, I do think about oh, okay, I've got a makeup test that I'm going to be doing in a couple of weeks, right? I've got a prosthetic. I'm going to do the thing. I've got an idea for the concept of how I want the makeup to look. I could write something really small and do the makeup test and then just do that thing. I could do that, but the idea of putting it out there is where the problem lies, because I don't want to, like, I've put so much out for Haunted so far, like the test scene and all these like images and posters and shit like that. I'm at the point now where I don't want to put anything out until I have the film in the can, because I don't need to build any more hype. The movie's been hyped. I don't need to, in a way, spoil things. Like I think we can basically
I
agree
understand
that
what you're saying there. I'm going to interrupt real quick just to say that you don't necessarily need to hype the overall project to just show off what you do, right?
Yeah.
And you can exemplarize what you're doing while getting to that longer term project. And at least it's my experience, and this is from a slightly different perspective, right? Mm-hmm. With illustration, where I've seen people who have projects where they have not released their finished work for years, but they keep releasing like highly finished drawings, character art, stuff like that, and people stay on board. They still like the actual like work that's being generated, even if it's not the finished thing. So like, I'm not even saying that this needs to be, within the Haunted universe or whatever. Mm-hmm. It just can be like, hey, this is what I do. I'm a director. Like, I make this stuff. And then maybe it leads to ultimately the longer term project. Or it's a way for you to collect and build that audience that you want anyway.
Right. Which is kind of part of the reason why I started doing like haunted home theater. Mm-hmm. Right. Like last year I did that little movie hosting thing. Yeah. And they were fun. Yeah, they were absolutely fun. And I think I am going to have more of them for this coming October.
Yeah.
Because they're not that hard to do. And to be honest with you, it was kind of a fun thing to do for me to get some use out of my equipment and all that kind of stuff. And I got to use it a little bit better. And it got me 100 subscriptions to the Jow Films YouTube page, which had 0 before it. Yeah. Which, speaking of which, by the way, we're recording this on the day that Mr. Rainwater hit 100,000 subscribers to Trailer Park Warlock. Round of applause, Mr. Rainwater. Round of applause. I am very proud of you, sir. New York Times best-selling artist. 100,000 subscriber comics illustrator. It's you are just racking up the laurels, sir. Congratulations. But
I appreciate it.
What was I saying? Oh yeah, so it was good to do that. And there was times when I was doing other little shorts where I was doing I don't know if you ever saw Pictures. Did you ever see Pictures? Did I show you Pictures?
No.
It was me and Dierico, and it was me with a bad green screen behind me as like this 70s Italian movie executive. And all I would do is I would go see a movie that was out in theaters, and then I would come back and so there's a video series about it now that I don't know what they call it. This one guy does it. He does almost the exact same thing that me and Dierico did. I'm almost convinced that he stole it from our thing, because we put our thing on Funny or Die. But I can't find it there anymore, which is weird. But it is on my YouTube page. It's a private thing, but I'll send you the video.
Okay.
But it's me as a 70s guy in this like goofy afro, smoking a cigarette with like a tweed sports coat, talking about.
That's the thing, though, is like that's your ability to sketch. Is you can Neil Breen it, right?
Yeah.
It's just like single man production, and that allows you to work out ideas, right?
Yes. And the single man thing is the hang up, though, because I really don't. It's a lot to be in front of the camera and behind the camera, because I've shot things where I've shot other things that I quote unquote sketches, where I wasn't behind the camera and I didn't notice that the microphone was off, and the entire thing is just without audio. So it was just an entire day's wasted work.
Yeah.
And the problem has been, for at least for the last 2 years, finding people who aren't COVID nutcases and all that kind of stuff.
Sure.
Because
well, here's the problem too: is I've had caffeine today, so like I've got executive brain, and so like the thing is like this is such a TikTok.
Oh God, I could never do TikTok. Please don't tell me to do TikTok.
No. I'm just giving you sort of a cultural outlook, right?
Yeah.
Like we're in a TikTok culture right now, which is to say people love shorts. People like it's kind of our version of like Sunday funnies almost, except they're not on Sunday. They're every day, every minute, every hour, every second of the week. But people really love either quick gags or quick little informational bites. And like you're a fucking director, trained, like screenwriter, trained, like you've got the chops. And I'm kind of like, Jal should be fucking killing it right now in this world. And I know that like I want to see you fucking haunt it. I'm spitballing with you right now because I'm like, there's a way that you could approach with a consequence-free mindset, just fucking around and finding ways to make stuff that will help you amplify your path.
My audience and all that kind of like my networking and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, because when Haunted comes out, I want to see that thing fucking be like the thing that everybody is talking about for that month. You know what I mean?
And then, and the goal to me has been trying to do that on Twitter, like get a fan base with mutual interest in horror and this and that. And for a while I was into that, and then I realized after a while that Twitter's not real. This shit doesn't matter. And now I'm more, see, this is the thing where the consequence free is in my brain, where it's, I don't want to call it consequence free, more so result free. I don't know. I don't know how to describe it, but the mindset that I've adopted is I'm going to make this film. If it's good, people will find it and tell other people about it, and it'll take off. If it's not good, it'll just be a thing, and that'll be the end of it. And whether or not I suck up to Twitter and, you know what I mean? If I, do the whole follow back thing or whatever, which I've done, like I've undone like over 1,000 follows that I did because I was just like, this is going nowhere. This is fucking pointless. Everybody's doing this and nobody's any the more better for it. And then the other part of me is like, oh, well, you did put your fucking script into a whole bunch of screenwriting competitions and you won dozens of them. Like we're talking grand prize, top tier, first place, selection, da-da-da-da-da. Yeah. And you are no closer to making your movie for it. So to my point of view, the art is going to have to speak for itself. And here's one thing I want to throw in before you jump back in.
Sure.
I like, and maybe this is an ego thing, maybe this is a vanity. I loved when Digits came out and people were shocked. And we've talked about this before. They were like, I didn't know you could do that. I didn't know you knew how to do that. Wow, that was really good. I didn't know you were a good writer. Oh, I didn't know that, you could get that kind of shot. I didn't know you could do that visual effect. I didn't know blah, 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 blah. So many people said that kind of stuff to me.
Sure.
I get off on that. I love that. The only thing taking is people by surprise.
You're not going to be able to get away with that forever, though. Like, because I'm now at the, okay. So maybe I just want you to be at the fucking point where I'm at. I show people what I'm doing. They're like, "Oh, cool!" And then
lift me up, Mr. Rainwater.
Like the numbers don't fucking matter to them. They're just like, "Oh, okay, your cartoon is great," you know.
Yeah.
And like, what I want to see is, I want to see you be like a fucking, I don't know, whether it's TikTok, YouTube, Voodoo, whatever the fuck, right? You have created your career wherever it is, doing that, and you can be in that place where it's like, "Yeah, I do this," and people are like, "Oh, okay." And they're either interested or they aren't interested, right?
Yeah.
But you're making stuff. And because it's in that process of when you're making stuff that it doesn't even matter anymore whether or not people are impressed. What matters is like your own ping pong session with yourself.
Yeah.
Like how are you getting to the next level with yourself? Because you're going to be at that place where you're going to get so much positive feedback from people to where it really starts to become irrelevant unless you have people who are really poignant about what they have to say. And you always have that. But like what I'm trying to say is like I want to see you get to that next fucking level because I think that you are ready for it and you have been training for that moment. Like you know what I mean? Like
yeah. What's the point? What's the point in lifting the weights if you're not going to get in the ring?
That's how I feel, right?
I get it.
And that's why, like, and it's funny because that's kind of why I stopped sketching for a long time because sketching I would use as like that weightlifting thing because, oh, you know, all these ideas will go into my work and whatever. There was a point where it was like, I've been doing all this training and what is it leading to? And then now I'm at this point where it's like, I just have to go. I have to perform and it doesn't fucking matter whether or not I'm doing all the lifts in the world. I'm fighting every fucking day. Like,
yeah,
at a certain point, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Whether or not I have the chops, I'm proving the chops by the fact that I'm still existing, doing what I'm doing. So like, I think there's a point where that happens the way, you know, our technological networking is set up, it's set up in such a way that it rewards people who have that attitude. It really does. Like, it really rewards people who just put stuff out without consequence. The consequence is somebody says that you either like it or they don't like it. You take that feedback and you either reject it or you take it in and use it in some sort of creative, constructive way to make something better the next time. So like, it's interesting because it's this automatic feedback mechanism that in a lot of ways is even more, I mean, I think it's more constructive. It's definitely more constructive and cheaper than art school. Because you know what I'm saying? Like, you get automatic feedback from complete strangers. Not all of it's going to be great feedback. But then, you know, 1 out of 100 times, you're going to get somebody who's going to be like, yeah, you know, your composition's off here. If you did, here are things you could do here and there that would make it better. And also the information is just free, right? You can just find it. You can go on YouTube and find out how to, you know, how to follow the 180 rule or whatever the fuck.
But I thought you were talking about the critique because the critique is fucking free all over the internet.
Right. Well, and that's the thing, right? Is like, that's the other problem is like 95% of, maybe that's too big of a number, but it's a high percentage number. It's like 80 to 90% of the critique on the internet is not particularly useful, but there is a good 10% that is like solid.
And you could turn that 10% into like 20, 25% if you really pick apart what the shitty people are saying.
Yeah.
You can figure stuff out. Yeah.
And also a lot of times people don't know how to communicate.
Right.
What it is that they're experiencing. And that's usually when you have crappy critiques is people just don't they don't know how to communicate like the thing that they didn't get or why they weren't pulled into the work, right?
Yeah.
It's just like all they know how to say is I didn't like it, you know.
Right.
Which is, you know, that's most people, right? That's because most people are not trained to be art literate. They're trained to be to consume art, basically.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't know. I felt like I had a greater point to this ramble, but I think my whole thing is, I really want to see you. I just have this idea in my head that is probably incredibly unrealistic because you're also raising a child in like life. But I just have this idea of like you would probably rock YouTube as somebody who releases like your own shorts and not even like just, you know. You're saying what the fuck is a micro short, by the way?
So like a short film is technically anything 60 minutes or under, which is kind of unbelievable if you think about it, because a 60-minute thing or whatever, most people will be like, isn't that a fucking movie? Like in 1930 it was, but nowadays that's considered to be a short, especially if you're like if you're submitting to a film festival, it has to be 60 minutes or under to be considered a short. A micro short is something probably within the span of 2 to 3 minutes. That's usually what it is. which again, I think I can knock those out. I really do. But it feels like there's so much prep and work that I need to do to get Haunted ready to go.
Yeah.
And the problem with me is, so like when you, and this is not me making excuses, because you are giving me a nice little kick in the ass this evening, and I appreciate it. But this is me laying out the problems that I also have to deal with. A lot of people think, oh, when you make a movie, you know, you have to get the props, you have to train the actors, you have to write it, you have to, you know, get the camera, figure out the shots, the lighting, the sound, yada, yada, yada. There's also a lot of red tape that's involved. And I'm not even talking about money. I'm talking about permits. You have to go to the government and say, hey, I want to film in your park. And they say, okay, we'll get back to you. And they don't get back to you. So you have to call them back. And then they say, well, what do you want to film in our park? Well, it's this thing about these people getting killed. Oh, you're going to have knives? Do you have insurance? Hang on a minute. I got to go get the insurance guy on the phone. Okay, the insurance guy wants to know what kind of prop master I'm going to have on set. What kind of knives am I going to have on set? Are they going to be sharpened or are they going to be fake? Are there stunts involving the knives? Blah, 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 blah. He comes back and he says, okay, we need this much money for you for your insurance. And I say, okay, I don't think I have that. I'll have to go somewhere else. I go back to the state and I say, okay, I'm all good. And they go, oh, can we just see your insurance? And then I say, oh yeah, I'll have to get that to you. I'll call you back. And it's that, you know what I mean? It's that situation where I have to run through that red tape. Say I have the money to get the insurance. The insurance company takes 2 weeks to send me the fucking paperwork that I need to get the thing. Then I send it over to the film department and they take a month and a half to get back to me because who the fuck knows what they're doing. By this point in time, do you know what I mean? Like it's that time where you have to jump through all these hoops. Now I could renegade it. I could run and gun it. But at this point I have an actual company. I have a child and a family that I have to protect.
There's a lot on the line.
There is a lot on the line. And that becomes a problem for me. And you know what I mean? It was back in the days of digits. There was no actual company. There was no kid. I wasn't married. I barely had a penny to my name. And it was just a bunch of kids with a camera fucking around wherever they could find it and made piece together a movie. And that was it. Now it's a different story. Now I have to be corporate. Now I have to go by the law. And it's not even that I have to. I want to, for the sake of safety, right? I don't want people getting hurt on my film set. I don't want someone getting killed. Sure. I don't want anything like that to happen. Now there's a new thing, COVID compliance, where you have to have a COVID officer on set, making sure everybody's okay. That I think is fucking overkill. But say I hire an actor who has an immunodeficiency. It's a possibility and actually kind of likely.
Yeah.
And then say I don't have a COVID person on set. They get COVID and they die. Well, not only have I killed someone, well, I haven't killed someone, but you know what I mean. But I've lost a member of the cast. I've like that. Then I got to stop the schedule. I'm not even talking about, like, it sounds so corporate of me to be just talking about the film, not let alone the fact that someone's life just ended. Like that sounds cold hearted, but I'm just like illustrating all of these things that I have to prepare and jump through and get done in order to just get on set and do things. So I feel like it's either going to be one or the other. Either I put Haunted completely on the side, right, and say, I'll make this movie in 5 years and just focus on doing YouTube videos and trying to blow that up and make money and make connections and make something to stand on there. Or I focus entirely on Haunted and be nobody for the next 2 years. So like, it really comes down to what interests me the most, because we all see my cooking pictures and we all think, wow, Zhao came up with something that looks really interesting and delicious and kind of weird. And I kind of want to see how he made it or what it tastes like or blah, blah, blah. And I've thought about that. I was like, I could do a cooking video and I could be a character doing the cooking video.
Yeah,
and that would. Right.
You would do on that too.
I feel pretty confident that would do well. But at the end of the day, I ask myself, is that going to give me fulfillment? Is that going to make me happy? No, it's not, because I've done short films and little skits before. I did pictures. I did Mambo. I did, we shot Duty. We shot Fergie. We shot all these other things that never saw the light of day for various reasons. Those things did give me some fulfillment because they were films. Now I want to make a movie. It's been 10 plus years since Digits. Right? 2011, 2022. It's 11 years almost this August that I've made a movie. And I have the itch. And that's what I want to do. As much as I would love to do short form stuff, I want to make a movie.
Yeah, I'm more like trying to brainstorm a means or a process by which you could do short form where it is so minimal in the time
That it
on
doesn't
your
detract
part.
from that. No, I get
Yeah.
that's why I tried to backdoor Terror House into making a movie. This fucking poster behind me, I was trying to do a short film as Terror House, and then I was thinking, you know what? Haunted runs about 90 minutes by the page right now. And I thought, you know what? The opening sequence of Haunted isn't really a horror sequence. Do you know what I mean? It's a setup, but it's not a horror sequence. Usually most horror movies start with a scare scene, like Scream. There's a kill scene right in the beginning.
Yeah.
Haunted doesn't have that. Haunted's got a slow build. There is nothing creepy or spooky that happens in the first scene. And I thought, you know what I'll do? I'll shoot Terror House as a short film, and then what I'll do is I will pigeonhole that as the opening sequence of Haunted. And then I can tie that into something like an after credit scene and tease a sequel or some nonsense like that. And at the end of the day, I was like, I looked at Haunted and I was like, I don't want to make a sequel to this. I do not want to make a sequel. I want to put everything into this one movie and call it there. Because if I go on with a sequel, there's a multitude. I wrote out outlines. I have some scripts, like rough drafts for Haunted 2 and 3 and all this other kind of shit. I came to the conclusion, I don't want to do that. I don't want to make a franchise. I want to make a single film, and that's it. And I want to walk away from it and leave everybody fucking angry at me for not doing more of it. And that's what spoke to me as an artist. And that's why, like, it became the thing where it's like, I don't want to do Terror House anymore because there's not, you know what I mean? Like, I could probably shoehole that story into Haunted somehow. Probably could make it the third act, to be honest with you. But I don't want to. And I feel like doing shorts and stuff like that, there's a possibility that I could do some things that would be shorts, like a 30-second video or something like that might be related to Haunted, but not really related to Haunted. Like, so right now, I'm working on visual effects testing. I have, spoiler alert, there's a Grim Reaper character in Haunted. He carries a giant scythe. I don't know. Is that how you pronounce it? Scythe?
Yeah. You got it.
Scythe, whatever.
I think it's scythe. Anyway.
It's flaming. It's on fire.
Yeah.
Right? The metal knife part of it. We can't go around the forest with a fucking with a scythe on fire in a person who's in a hooded costume with a black cover on their face so they can barely see to begin with. We will set the forest on fire and I will lose everything. People might get hurt or die. It's dangerous. It's stupid.
Right.
However, I'm working on, I bought the LED lights to get the orange glow attached to the scythe so that it puts off the right light specter, right? And then I can digitally add fire and remove those later and make it look like it actually is on fire. That's the current project that I'm working on. Could I do that? Could I put those lights on my arm and then turn that on and make it look like my whole hand is on fire and do a video? Yeah, I probably could.
Right.
But here's the thing. Number one, then I got to give up some creative juice to think of a concept around that. Two, I'm giving away that I can do that. And I'm losing. There's in something in film called suspension of disbelief, right? Mm-hmm. The moment I let you know I can set my hand on fire digitally, right? And someone knows that I can do that. When you watch Haunted, there's a little bit less of you that watches that flaming scythe going, oh, that's really on fire.
Yeah.
And that robs you of that experience. It's the movie magic that I don't want to give away because so much has been given away these days that I want people to sit there and go, is that thing really on fire? How the fuck did you get that thing on fire? And me to just go, I'm good. Don't worry about it. Yeah, it was really on fire. Yeah, we stabbed that guy with it. Like, you know what I mean? And I want people to question whether or not things were real. I want them to have that lingering questionability in their mind, because I think that's where the fun of movies comes from. watching a movie going, wow, that was like, to
Sure.
not even think about it. Like when you watch a movie these days, you're like, okay, CGI Spider-Man is fighting CGI Doc Ock. I know there are no stakes here. It's two rubber men
For sure.
from a computer fighting on the side of a building.
For sure.
It robs you of a little bit of that greatness. Now, is fucking Michael Keaton beating the shit out of Jack Nicholson riveting in Batman 89? Not really. Not really. But you're in it because you know that they're actually on set throwing punches at each other and dropping digital teeth and all this stuff. It's not a digital gag. There's something about that realism that makes it a little bit more authentic, that makes it a little bit more meaningful.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
And that's what I want to maintain, I guess is the word.
Yeah.
And protect. So the idea that I could put out a video and set myself on fire, get a lot of views, I could probably make a little joke around it or something of the sort. You know what I mean? Like it's pretty easy. It could write itself. But then I have everybody going, oh, Zhao knows how to set things on fire digitally. And now we know when the house burns down at the end of the movie. Spoiler alert, it doesn't. But if it did, if the house was on fire at the end of the movie, they'd be like, oh, that's digital. As opposed to watching it going, holy shit, Zhao set a house on fire for his movie. And that, while that may be, again, my vanity, my ego, or whatever, that makes people really kind of energized about the movie. That makes them want to go out and tell somebody, this movie was fucking great. That I didn't think that Zhao would set a house on fire. He set the fucking house on fire. And I don't have to say shit. I can sit there silently and go, that's right. Keep talking about my movie. Tell people about my movie. I'm not going to tell you that fire was fake. And that's what I want. That's what I really want. So, I mean, I love the fact that you are kicking me in the ass because I really do need that right now in terms of getting more shit done.
Well, and I think, I mean, what really sparked it was just like thinking about what would your version of sketching look like, right?
That's fair.
And it is, I mean, it would be a more time intense thing, you know, just by the nature of the medium that you have.
Right. Absolutely.
It's harder. I guess you could theoretically do it in 30 minutes, but you would be containing yourself in TikTok territory, which is...
Yeah. Well, I mean, YouTube has the new short thing that they do. Yeah,
that's true.
I don't think I've watched 3 of them in the last 6 months that they've had it or whatever. Like, I don't really give a shit. It's Instagram. You could put it on Instagram or TikTok or YouTube or Facebook or whatever, and people will retweet it and this and that. But it doesn't have that much appeal to me. You know where I have the most sketching, which is where everybody calls me the most prolific, which is writing. Mm-hmm. At a certain point in the day, I can't do anything more. Like if I lose sunlight or if I don't have the right set or if I don't have actors or whatever like that, the equivalent for me and you is writing. I can sit down and I can write a script. I have dozens of scripts sitting. I wrote Terror House. I wrote Haunted. I wrote Don't Open Before Christmas. I've got script. When we were meeting for my film screenwriting group, I was the guy, like we would meet once a month. Mm-hmm. Every other month I would have a script. Whether it was a short film or a feature film, I would have a script because I could knock those shits out left and right. And like right now, when I have downtime, I've been working on Cemetery Sweethearts. I felt like it was robbing my time from Haunted, but I came to the mindset where I was like, okay, I only have so much creative juice in a day. But then I kind of, what's the word? Not subgenred, earmarked. I realized that only so much of it can be earmarked for Haunted.
Yeah.
Before I run out, but I can always turn around and use some more of it. I can wring more out of the sponge for another project that's different. If it was like straight horror, would never work. I can't go from working on Haunted to working on a different horror thing. But if I'm going from working on a horror thing to a fucking rom-com, easy. In fact, I've felt that it's helped me to have that variety in my brain where it's like, oh, I can do something else. And it kind of gives me more energy to do stuff. And I'm being doubly proactive. So writing has really been where I've been doing without consequence because, like I said, I've got dozens of scripts, many that people have not seen, that I've never talked about, that I've kind of put in a shelf and forgot about. Like I found one the other day I wrote a script about a vampire on the other side of a door in the middle of winter, and this girl's in their cabin, and they're just having a conversation. Have I told you about this one before?
No.
It's what the fuck's the title of it? Shit. Not Let the Right One In, because that's the actual name of the fucking that's an actual, but it was based off that concept that a vampire cannot enter without an invitation.
Yeah.
And it was the idea that this vampire has this girl trapped in a cabin in the snow in the middle of nowhere. And she's got nowhere to go. She can't call for help or anything like that. And he's just on the other side of the door. And it's a conversation that two of them are having between the door where it's just like, why don't you just let me in and let me kill you? That's how it's going to end. Like, and it's this conversation about, you know, vampires and how that whole vampire thing works, and the idea of fighting to stay alive when your inevitable conclusion is going to be death. Like, it's a very dialogue heavy thing. Don't get me wrong. But I found it. It was in one of my folders when I was cleaning out some old scripts and, you know, consolidating some of my memory, my hard drive. And I was like, wow, that was a really good fucking script. I could probably take another pass at that at some point, and that would be a really great short, like a short film. But I don't feel like I'm going to touch that until Haunted is done. Like, once Haunted is in the can, I can start thinking about the next thing I'm going to shoot, because editing is a completely different situation. Once my brain hits edit mode, I can create differently on the page or production wise, but the editing thing is once it's there. But once I have to get through production first on Haunted, and that's the problem.
For sure.
But I definitely want to sketch like that idea. And this has been a 45-minute rant from me. I know.
I don't think it's been that long.
That desire in me to do shit is there, 100% there. I want to. It's just that feeling of betrayal to the project that I'm beholden to at the moment that I feel I struggle with. That's the right way to put it.
I mean, I have to, I don't know. I think I'm also coming at it from the perspective of somebody who's been doing the same project for about 5 or so years, where there's a certain freedom in levity that comes from not being too attached to a bigger project for a time. Because inevitably there comes a point where it's like, I want to do a giant ass ambitious project. But I think also what might be happening for me is that I on some level want to fuck around with videography, basically. Like I've had this idea for forever that I think is an idea that only I would use. But basically, like, filming like black and white scenarios where and by that I mean like black and white footage in like either slow-mo or reverse or whatever, and the idea of it being like wall art that you could project at parties while somebody was playing music or like having to go along with music, like basically like motion wall art. And the way that I've thought about the process for it, and to me it seems like it would be incredibly simplistic in some sense if you're willing to have like a very consequence free attitude towards it, where it's just like, well, let's just see what happens, right? Like I'm trying to remember. I don't know how to communicate properly the ideas that I've had in my head, but basically just the idea of like what sparked this was, for a while I was watching these videos on YouTube that were called and I think the series is still there, it's called Trapping in Japan. And these videos would just be like trap music, but sometimes there were videos where you were just like, your perspective was this person walking around Japan, and it's kind of in slow motion and great to watch if you're high. Like it creates sort of a mode where you're just sort of set in what's going on and you're just taking it in, and it's very, you know, it's not a story at all. It's just like you kind of find yourself in a in the action of just like living day-to-day life in Japan while listening to trap music. I don't know why those two things go together, but they go together pretty well, at least on this particular YouTube channel. So anyway, that has always fascinated me, and I've thought up different scenarios that would be not necessarily the same as that, but kind of taking on that concept. So like another version of that is like drone footage, right? With drones, you can like do all kinds of stuff. Where you're flying over cityscapes or flying through different things, you know, like one of my favorite, there's a video you can find on YouTube by, I don't know who made the video. It goes with this track by this band called Palm Tracks, or this electronic artist band or electronic artist, I'm not sure. But anyway, the view is from a drone, but it's like a drone race. Cause you know, there's like drone racing.
I did not know that.
Thing. Yeah, it's a thing. And anyway, it's first person perspective of this drone race, and it's really fucking cool. Like, it's extremely fast. It's sort of like real life pod racing when you're in that first person perspective.
Yeah.
So it just like, it was another sort of venue where I was like, oh, you could do a lot of really interesting things with just very simple premises. Now maybe that only works because it's a short video, you know, and it's set to music. That certainly helps. But like, something about that interests me, where you can take all these really short, simple premises and make videos from them. And maybe that's just because that suits sort of my experimental modes, where and if I'm in experimental mode, I'm in a consequence-free mode, right? I'm in a mode where I'm just like, let's see what happens. I'm not hung up on like how it turns out. I just want to see what the result is, which in a lot of ways is, I think, foundational to creative modes, right? Like we all kind of start from that point initially. When we start off as artists, is like we're just trying stuff out and we're just seeing where it goes. And it's only later on, as we become more attuned and more like educated and more set up in how to make art, that we actually start working towards trajectories and working towards targets and working towards results, right, in what we do. So like, I know that most of my comic work right up until after art school was not like, it wasn't focused on any particular goal, because I was just working on things. I was trying to figure things out, and I was formulating all of my what would become expertise, but it isn't expertise in that moment.
Skill set.
Yeah. And I still think that a lot of that experiment, while I don't think that particular work is interesting to me now, I think that there is oftentimes a lot of experimental work that can be interesting later on if applied correctly. You know, like, I think there's a lot of painting or collage work that can be that way. And I definitely think like this idea I had in my head about like, I don't know what to properly call it, but it would be like wall projector art or whatever. You know, it's the kind of thing where it's like, I'm not too worried about how the results are, because I'm not actually very invested on how people perceive it, because it would be something that would be so totally in the background that you wouldn't really notice it unless you just kind of walked by it and looked at it, and then maybe you stare at it for a couple of minutes while you're at a party and there's nothing really to do at the moment. So you're just watching, you know, the slow motion footage of somebody skateboarding or whatever the fuck, you know, while you listen to whatever music happens to be on in the background at the moment. So anyway, that is sort of I think what also is sparking a lot of my interest in this consequence-free attitude, because like I said, I think new forms sort of rise from it too. New genres, new modes come from it when you just kind of let go and see what happens. And I think I'm I don't know what kind of comic work I'm going to do after Trailer Park Warlock, but I do want it to be at least a little bit, I don't know, like not boundary pushing in a technological sense, but maybe in a genre sense where I'm trying something a little bit different and new, and something where I'm not sure if it's going to work, right? Because that's always that's the sweet thing.
You dropped out for a second there. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. You had dropped out too, so I wasn't sure. I just stopped for that reason. So anyway, I was just saying that's sort of one of the sweet spots for creativity is being in that place where you're not sure if it's going to work, because that's where you're going to do the most interesting work. That's where you're going to be taking all the big chances, and maybe it pays off. Maybe it doesn't pay off at all, So anyway.
Yeah. See, and this is me coming from the business standpoint where it's like, I need stuff to start paying off because I need pay.
Well, yeah. Well, and so that's why I was talking about the YouTube thing, because goddamn, I'm seeing a lot of stuff on YouTube where it's just like, they're just trying shit out. They don't even know if it's going to work. And it gets, big hits, and, and people are able to build audiences off of that. Because I think, here's the other thing is people are wanting to see new stuff, and they are want to see stuff that really pushes boundaries conceptually or in other ways, right? Because what's the alternative? It's like a lot of the same bullshit that we've seen for decades anyway.
Right. Yep.
Like you can have a Disney Plus account, you're not going to see anything new. Like you've seen Disney movies, you've watched them all your life. I mean, I'm ready to be done with them, basically. So like,
yeah, you could say that with Star Wars and Marvel and all that stuff right now. Like I'm excited for the Obi-Wan Kenobi series that's coming out, but I already know what it's going to be. It's going to be lackluster. It's going to be a letdown. It's not going to deliver where I want it to. It's not going to be what I want it to be. But I'm still excited for it anyway. But the idea that I like what you're talking about with the experimental mindset of, I don't know if this is going to work, but I'm going to try it anyway. And I am coming to that point where, so like right now, the big thing that's really exciting me that I'm learning is so would you say that creating without consequence is also kind of like being willing to fail or experimenting and trying to learn something that maybe you haven't seen or done before? Would you say that it falls within that realm?
Oh yeah, for sure.
So, okay. So for me, practical effects, not so much like explosions and squibs and stuff like that. Like makeup effects have really been fascinating to me lately. So like I talked about the prosthetic that I have, right? There's a way to paint prosthetic on the face, right? And I've been studying and reading and doing all this kind of stuff to learn how to properly do it, right? So the character, the greeter, who you're familiar with, who anybody who's watched anything from Haunted has seen, the guy in the top hat with the skeletal face paint and this and that. I want it to be questionable if this guy is a Joe Schmo off the street with face paint on and he's just a psycho, or if he's actually something undead, right? Have you seen an undead thing before in movies and TV? Right? Yeah. A zombie. Yeah, we've seen it. We've seen demons. We've seen things like this. We've seen all of those kinds of face paint. We've seen monsters, right? You look at something like Shape of Water. Like they created a monster suit and they painted it and this and that. How do I make something new out of the greeter? And it occurred to me, what's halfway between alive and dead? And that's a question that I don't think anybody's really asked themselves.
Yeah.
Because I want to ride that line. I want to straddle that questionable line of, is he dead or is he alive or what's going on here? I want to raise that question. How do I raise that question through makeup? How do I raise that question through special effects design? And it dawned on me, all I have to do, I want his entire skin complexion, right? Not the face paint that looks like a skeletal thing. The complexion of the rest of his hands, his neck, the rest of it. I want it to look like one big bruise.
Oh.
So it's got like a yellowy green kind of a, not like a, oh, he's like a decaying thing, but like
Yeah.
bruised
Yeah.
from like top to bottom. Like you can't see any actual skin thing. Is he decaying? Is that face paint? Is it, what is that? What's going on? And then layer face paint, like the skeletal face paint thing that everybody does in fucking horror movies these days, and James Bond does over that. So now you have a question of, is this a fucking demon dressing up for Halloween? Or is this a guy who's taken it too far? Or is this a guy who's been in a fight lately and he's got the face? Like, why would he be in a fight? Was he trying to kill somebody? Like, those questions will start popping up in people's heads by that design that I'm creating. And I've never seen anything like that before. The Grim Reaper character, right? I've seen a skeletal hand wrapped around for a Grim Reaper character. Like you watch Scrooged, you know what the fucking long fingers look like and everything like that. But I thought, what if I have like a skeletal hand, but then you have like translucent skin above it, almost like a condom. We'll just put it like that. Over the hand, right? Almost like a, not like a jellyfish, but kind of like that. Mm. And you could see fluid in there between the bone and the actual skin, the translucent skin. That adds an organic element to it. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, oh, is this real? Is that like a real hand? Or is that a guy in a suit? Don't know. That idea has been something that I've been playing with. That's the kind of stuff that I've been experimenting with. I've been sketching, so to speak, in terms of my monster creations, because I want to ride that line. So those have been my sketches lately. It has been, how can I do this? I mean, granted, I'm still doing it with an aim, right? There is a consequence. I'm either failing or succeeding in those things, but at the moment, no one else is seeing it, and no one will get to see it unless their actual film happens and I release trailer and this and that, or the actual film. And that's where my excitement has been failing in private. So I guess it's that's my form of creating without consequence.
Sure.
Has been failing in private or succeeding in private. I won't tell. That's where I've been finding that experimental world at the moment. So I don't know, maybe you tell me, am I fulfilling the creating without consequence because I'm not hyping it up and putting that out there that I have these things, other than just fucking explaining it in the last 20 minutes. Do you know what I mean? Is that without consequence? Am I doing it right?
Yeah, I mean, I would say so. You're definitely working out all the problems that you're trying to solve, right? In order to do a much bigger project.
But even if I succeed those things, if I get what I want, I don't know if they're going to work. Do you know what I'm saying? That's the consequence I'm throwing to the wind. I don't know if people are going to subconsciously read in their minds what I mean, it comes down to the intentional fallacy thing again, where whatever the artist intended is irrelevant. It's going to be based on the perceptions of the audience members, and those are going to vary by person to person. Right. But that's kind of where I've arrived, whereas that's where my creating without consequences is where I'm just going to get what I want. And if I can't, then so be it. But if I do get it, we'll see if it works. And I know that the strength of the story will be good enough that people will be like, oh, that was a good movie. I'll never watch it again, but it was a good movie. That I'll be okay with that. Like that'll be okay with me.
For sure.
And then we'll move on from there. But anyway, I've rambled too much. I feel like we've just taken turns rambling. We have had less of a discussion in this episode than any other episode before, but that's okay. It's our second episode back since our extended break, and I think we both had a lot we wanted to blah.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, in that sense, we're kind of sketching. So
sure, we'll go with that. And we'll end on, how about that? We'll end on that. Thank you for tuning in, everybody. We'll see you next week.